both Russia and China are dramatically increasing their space assets. John Huth is a defense intelligence officer for space and counterspace within the Defense Intelligence Agency. John, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mimi.
So you first started publishing this report, which is called Challenges in Security in Space Report, back in 2019. Since then, what have been the major changes?
So since 2019, there have been dramatic changes. Russia and China have increased their on-orbit assets by about 70% over the last 2 years. In the report, we talk about things such as Russia and China's increase in space domain awareness capabilities, their counterspace capabilities, as well as their efforts to look to the moon and beyond, what they plan to do there. And then we've also have an expanded portion on the impacts of space debris.
So before we get into those details, which I do want to touch on, you know, since the report came out, Russia invaded Ukraine. What do we know about how satellite capabilities have been used for the war?
So the most dramatic ones, and you see on the news every night, probably the United States' imagery capabilities. You see pictures from Maxar, Planet Labs, and other places that have been used to provide context of what's happening on the ground day in and day out.
But what about Russia? How have they used their satellite capabilities?
So we haven't, you know, I can't talk in detail about what Russia's done. Clearly from the report and what you'll find in the report, things like their electronic warfare capabilities, they have a lot of those. Their counterspace capabilities, beyond that, we haven't really seen a whole lot in that regard.
So I wonder about China and if they've changed their approach in space since that war in Ukraine started.
So although it seems like it's been a long time since the war started, as far as any indications of how that might have changed China's perspective regarding space, it'd be really too early to tell. What we do know about China is, just as I mentioned with the U.S. and our commercial space capabilities, China is launching, has been launching, at least for the last several years, a number of satellites to collect imagery from space and be a competitor with the U.S. in the commercial markets. And in this year alone, we expect them to launch around 50 satellites for those purposes.
You know, both China and Russia publicly say that they're against the weaponization of space. Do their actions reflect those beliefs?
Absolutely not. And again, as you'll find in DIA's report, both this one and the previous one, both Russia and China have and continue to develop a variety of counter space capabilities to deny space or the use of space to the United States and our allies.
And how do their capabilities compare to the U.S.'s capabilities? Where are they in that continuum?
So at DIA, we don't really do what we would call a net assessment or a red-blue comparison. Our focus is really on the capabilities of the threats and the growing threats. And what we do with that information is we inform our policymakers, our warfighters, and our acquisition professionals on that threat so they can consider those as they develop those policies or build those systems to address the threats.
So new to this year's report is a section on Russia and China's exploration of the moon and Mars. Is there any indication that they might be using that exploration for anything beyond scientific research?
So right now what we see is scientific research, but we also know both Russia and China in particular really leverage what they call dual-use capabilities or military-civil integration. So that's something we're certainly going to keep an eye on as they evolve in what they are doing scientifically, because we've seen them take capabilities in other domains and leverage those things that might be more civilian-focused into military capabilities.
Your report also mentions Iran and North Korea. What do we know about their the threats coming from those two?
So Iran and North Korea, a lot of their focus has really been on, I'll say, space launch, projecting power through being able to deliver weapons. So those technologies that can be used for space launch for peaceful purposes can just as equally be used, again, in a dual-use role to apply to delivery of ICBMs or delivery of counterspace capabilities to orbit.
And is there anything that the U.S. needs to do to ramp up in response to the threats that you outlined in the report?
So I think we've seen the U.S. ramp up. Certainly we now have a space command. We now have a new space force. And I think the U.S. has responded to those threats.
John, tell me about the mission of DIA and how this Office of Space and Counterspace fit into the larger mission.
Sure. So DIA's role is really to provide military intelligence to our warfighters, our policy customers, as well as our acquisition customers, to help inform those decisions that they are going to make in those respective areas. The Office of Space and Counterspace, I'll say, is a microcosm of that, where we provide foreign threat information on those space and counterspace capabilities as they evolve, and again, to inform those decisions. And we also work with customers across the globe to work on issues that are of common interest both to us and our partner nations.
All right. Well, John, thank you so much for coming in. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.